right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. All right, today, Israel's unbelief. Romans chapter 9, starting at verse 30. What does all this mean? Even though the Gentiles were not trying to follow God's standards, they were made right with God. It was by faith that this took place. But the people of Israel who tried so hard to get right with God by keeping the law never succeeded. Why not? Because they were trying to get right with God by keeping the law instead of by trusting in Him. They stumbled over the great rock in their path. God warned them of this in the scriptures when He said, I am placing a stone in Jerusalem that makes people stumble, a rock that makes them fall. But anyone who trusts in Him will never be disgraced. Dear brothers and sisters, the longing of my heart and my prayer to God is for the people of Israel to be saved. I know what enthusiasm they have for God, but it is misdirected zeal, for they don't understand God's way of making people right with Himself. Refusing to accept God's way, they cling to their own way of getting right with God by trying to keep the law. For Christ has already accomplished the purpose for which the law was given. As a result, all who believe in Him are made right with God. And now the commentary. Sometimes we are like these people, trying to get right with God by keeping His laws. We may think that attending church, doing church work, giving offerings, and being nice will be enough. After all, we've played by the rules, haven't we? But Paul's words sting. This approach never succeeds. Paul explains that God's plan is not for those who try to earn His favor by doing good, for it is those who realize that they can never be good enough and so must depend on Christ. We can be saved only by putting our faith in what Jesus Christ has done. If we do that, we will never be disappointed. The Jews had a worthy goal, to honor God, but they tried to achieve it the wrong way, by rigid and painstaking obedience to the law. Thus, some of them became more dedicated to the law than to God. They thought that if they kept the law, God would have to accept them as His people. But God cannot be controlled. The Jews did not see that their scriptures, the Old Testament, taught that salvation depended on faith, not human effort. Genesis chapter 15, verse 6. The great rock they stumbled over was Jesus. The Jews did not believe in Him because He didn't meet their expectations for the Messiah. Some people still stumble over Christ because salvation by faith doesn't make sense to them. They think they must earn their way to God, or perhaps God will simply overlook their sins. Others stumble over Christ because His values are the opposite of the world's. He asks for humility, and many are unwilling to humble themselves before Him. He requires obedience, and many refuse to put their wills at His disposal. Have you stumbled over this rock? Have you chosen to build your life on it? What will happen to the Jewish people who believe in God but not in Christ? Since they believe in the same God, won't they be saved? If that were true, Paul would not have worked so hard and sacrificed so much to teach them about Christ. Because Jesus is the most complete revelation of God, we cannot fully know God apart from Christ. And because God appointed Jesus to bring God and people together, we cannot come to God by another way. The Jews, like everyone else, must find salvation through Jesus Christ. John chapter 14, verse 6, and Acts chapter 4, verse 12. Like Paul, we should pray that all Jews might be saved and lovingly share the good news with them. Rather than living by faith in God, the Jews established customs and traditions in addition to God's law to try to make themselves acceptable in God's sight. But human effort, no matter how sincere, can never substitute for the righteousness God offers us by faith. The only way to earn salvation is to be perfect, and that is impossible. We can only hold out our empty hands and receive salvation as a gift. Christ accomplished the purpose for which the law was given in two ways. He fulfills the purpose and goal of the law, Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. In that He perfectly exemplified God's desires on earth. But He is also the termination of the law, because in comparison to Christ, the law is powerless to save. And again, people are trying to make themselves holy by thinking they can observe enough law or have this balance teetering, between the bad things I've done versus the good things I've done, and hope that it works out in your favor at the end. And it never will. And even, I don't know which writer it was, but even said, even our best works are nothing but filthy rags before God.
Right.
So, in that light, you could never, ever even, the balance would never, ever come down on the good side. It would just never happen. So, it's sad that we as a race, or not even a race, as a people, sometimes are just so prideful that we think we can do something when God says no, you can't, and yet we say, oh yes, we can. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
God says no, really you can't. Oh yeah, you watch me, I'm gonna do it. And we can't. We just can't, because we're not honest with ourselves and humble. Humility is really what it is.
Yeah.
They don't want to humble themselves to say, yep, you're right, I cannot. A lot of people fall into that trap. They just can't humble themselves and be honest with themselves and say, you're right, I can't. There's not any way that I could ever make up for what I've done. And come to that realization and say, I need your help. And he says, here it is. Here is Christ. All you need to do is believe that I've done it in him, and you'll be good. I will accept that. Are you sure? Are you sure there's something I can't pay or do? No, there isn't.
It's because it's too easy.
Yeah.
People think that it's too good to be true than it usually is.
Yeah.
But this is too good to be true, but it's really true.
Yeah, it's the devil saying, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's too bad. Okay, that's all we have for today. Hope everybody has a glorious day, and we'll talk to you later.